All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So there's going to be a little bit changes to these assignments here from here on out. One of the big things you may notice is at the very end, there isn't a question. That is now officially the exit ticket. Um, Thing is, you won't see the question here on the selection video anymore, and that means you have to be in class to answer the exit ticket. Otherwise, you're basically losing those points. Um, but what I'm going to be doing though instead is you can, you know, make up those points by doing extra work, and achieve 3,000, a word search, things like that. Now you can't be doing like 8 word searches, okay? But you can only do like one. So you're gonna have to make up those points otherwise, okay? Because again, the exit ticket can only be done in class. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we're gonna analyze the significance of the suffrage movement, and we're gonna examine the importance of the prohibition movement. All right. So here's your warm-up picture. Now, you may or may not know what the word prohibition means. If you do, awesome. You have a step ahead of everyone else. Um, and also, if you can recognize that hand with the torch, it's an American symbol, you know. So think to yourself what an American symbol is holding a torch, okay? And when you realize what it is, just remember that this symbol, it's not just like 10 feet tall. This thing is pretty big. So, that should help you with this picture. Okay. So the question is asking you, according to this artist, is prohibition a good thing or bad thing? And for you to justify it, explain why you say it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. Okay. So pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. So, isolationism. Isolationism is a policy to remain apart from the affairs or interests of other groups, especially when it comes to politics. Now, the thing is, remember, this is US history, you know. So when we talk about World War One and US history, we're not gonna be talking about like how it started and some of that. No, that was already done in world history. We're just gonna talk about the part when the US got involved. Okay. Now, also another thing too, um, World War One was not called World War One back then. Okay, the reason why? Because they didn't know there would be a World War Two. So World War One was known as the Great War or the War to End All Wars. So if you watch some movies and some of that, and you hear them say the Great War, the War to End All Wars, they're referring to World War One. Okay. Now, when it started, a lot of Americans were like, why should we get involved? Why? That stuff that's happening between Serbia, Germany, Russia, uh, France, Britain, Italy, Spain, all of them, that's over there, you know. And it's like I told the students in class, if your neighbors were yelling, screaming, shouting at each other, you wouldn't kick down the door and tell them, hey, you know, get along, you two, some of that. You wouldn't do that, you know. That's the same thing with America. They're like, we're not getting involved. We'll keep an eye. We'll listen what's happening. We're not getting involved. Okay. So while the war is starting and while it's the first part of it is going on, America is dealing with two major things, and that's women's suffrage and prohibition. Okay. Now, guys, especially you ladies, um, the word suffrage means the right to vote. It doesn't mean to suffer like hurt or be in pain. No, 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 no. That means the right to vote. Okay. Um, so like I said in class, there has been people, especially guys, who try to have women sign petitions to end women's suffrage, and there are women who will sign it. You know, and one article I read one time, I mean, this was years ago, a lady stopped them and told them, "Hey, you're signing away your right to vote." And these girls got mad at the guys, and the guys were like, "Hey, it's not our fault you don't know what that means." Okay. So that's one of the reasons why I'm really teaching about this, because again, it is an important thing in US history. And as in, you know, a person who grew up believing that a woman could do just as much as a man, um, I really believe that a woman does have the right to vote. And it's very important in US history. So, for the ladies, if you enjoy your rights, you like to have the ability to say what you like, wear what you like, and things like that. Have the freedoms that a lot of women in the past did not have. You owe it to these two ladies on that picture right there. The top one is Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and the other lady is Lucretia Mott. Those two ladies are like the godmothers of the women's suffrage movement. Okay, these are the ladies who kicked it off, and they created the first convention at Seneca Falls, in which they basically put their foot down and said, "Enough's enough. Women deserve the same as men. You know, women deserve to be treated the same and have the same rights as men." So at this convention, they basically took the Declaration of Independence and changed the words of where it said man and men to woman and women. And this became known as the Declaration of Sentiment. And this really was the start of the women liberation movement. Now, some of the main issues that they brought up at this convention was like the inability to control their wages. You know, so a woman could do a job like washing clothes, some of that, and a guy would be like, "Okay, how much to wash his clothes? 10 cents." Okay, cool. She washes his clothes. He gets it back, and she's like, "Okay, give you my 10 cents." He could give her 3 cents, and she'd be like, "Well, where's the rest?" "Oh, well, that's I think that's fair." She could not go to the sheriff and be like, "Hey, he said he was gonna pay me 10 cents. He only gave me three." The guy could easily say, "No, we agreed on three. I don't know what she's talking about. You know, she's just trying to get more out of me." You know, and the authorities would listen to the guy because the guy, his word meant more. You know, I mentioned this in before in other classes. Women could not have property. So if a father left his daughter some plot of land, like farmland, um, and the daughter got married, the husband would then inherit that land. And on top of that, if they got a divorce, he would keep it, not her. And lastly, one of the big ones was custody of children if there was a divorce. The courts basically looked at the man and said, "Well, you're the man. You're the one who's making money. You're the one who's basically the breadwinner, the support maker of that family. A woman can't make money. A woman can't do the hard work that a man can. So, ergo, the children should go with the man." So, yeah, things were really, really bad for women back then. But the biggest thing that these women were saying that they wanted was the right to vote. Because they knew if they have the right to vote, then everything else is basically gravy. You know, anything that comes up, they can vote on it or vote against it, things like that. Okay. Now, in 1851, Stanton met this really ambitious young lady named Susan B. Anthony, and that's an older picture of her right there. Susan B. Anthony was smart as a whip. This lady could argue. So when guys said, "Oh, women should not have these rights" and some of that, for every one argument a man had, she would have like three arguments against his. You know, she was a tough lady. She was threatened to be arrested and stuff like that. And she was like, "Do it." Tough, tough lady. So Stanton and her created the Women's Suffrage Association, they created a journal or magazine called the Revolution, in which they would tell women these are the chants to be cheering, these are the laws that are coming up, this is how you should talk to your husband, your boyfriend, whomever, about voting for women liberation, um, and women's suffrage, and just a lot of stuff on there. Whether the next meeting's going to be. Um, so as the years went on, we get to the 1900s. Some of these guys, um, politicians and some of that, basically were like, okay, fine, fine, fine. Here, we'll give you some rights. We'll give you some, privileges, kind of as a way to shut them up. They kind of like, oh, stop bickering, stop, guy. They basically just were told them, they did that to kind of keep them quiet. But these women, instead of being like, "Oh, thank you, oh, we appreciate this so much," they were just like, "Okay, keep coming with the rights, bring it on. What else do you got?" You know, because they knew what they were given wasn't enough. They knew they were not being given the big things that they really felt they deserved and earned and were basically a God given right. So the right to vote was still the top thing they wanted. Now, in the 1910s, the National Association of Women Suffrage Association, they were doing some negotiating, making some deals, lobbying Congress, talking to the president. So they're doing diplomatic things. Now, at this same time, there were these young ladies who basically grew up with uh, the Women's Association, Suffrage Association, and stuff like that. So they, instead of like cheering, chanting, some of that, they were a lot louder and they were more vocal and more present, than their predecessors in the past. Um, so you got one side who's being diplomatic, talking, discussing, and you got this other side that's shouting and picketing and yelling and things like that. Okay. Well, the thing is, it worked. Both sides, it worked. And the amendment was passed in Congress on June 4th, 1919, and it was ratified by the states on August 18th, 1920. And this officially made the 19th Amendment. Now, the thing is, you have to remember, just think about this. Women have only been have had the right to vote for 103 years. That isn't very long. Okay. And also on the Constitution, it says the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. So it doesn't say women on there. It doesn't specifically say women. It says it doesn't matter if you're a guy, girl, or whatever, however you identify as long as you're of age, you've registered to vote, and you're like not in jail or things like that, you can vote. You know, Now, the other big thing was prohibition. Now, throughout the 1800s, there was a lot of talk and, movement around about removing alcohol from different towns, counties, and states. At first, religious groups were basically trying to say that, yeah, alcohol is the root of a lot of problems. You know, they're saying it's the devil's drink and some of that. That no good thing really comes from drinking alcohol, you know, especially when people who can't control themselves, they only make things worse for themselves and especially the people that care about them, loved ones and their families and stuff like that. So states like Maine and Massachusetts passed strict laws outlawing alcohol, but a lot of other states basically were like, no, we'll leave it be. If a county or a town wants to make it illegal, that's their privilege, that's their right. But for our whole state to say no alcohol, nah, we're not gonna do that. Now, as time went on, and we get to the women um, suffrage movement and some of that, the women realized, like, yeah, you know what? We're starting to get the ball rolling on stuff for us. And one of the things that we really don't like is how our husbands and boyfriends show up drunk, and there's like no money for the house. You know, the way they saw it was alcohol was destroying the families and their marriages, because the husbands, get paid. They go to the bar, they would drink. Some get really drunk, gamble, lose all their money. Some guys thought, hey, I'm drinking. I'm Mr. Rico Suave. I'm the best looking guy around. I'm gonna sleep around, stuff like that. Um, so they come home and hey, they have no money, and the wives are like, well, how am I supposed to buy food, pay the rent, pay our bills, do things for the family if there's no money coming in? So they did different things to try to stop men from drinking. One of the big ones is like you see right there. Um, Women basically refused to give kisses, hugs, stuff like that to their husbands or boyfriends if they were drinking. And at first, it was kind of seen like, well, whatever, she's just saying this. But after a while, the guys realized like, oh no, these women are serious, and they didn't like that. That hey, you're my wife, you're my husband, you're supposed to, hug me, give me kisses, stuff like that. And these women were like, no, we're being serious. This drinking alcohol has to stop. And on top of that, when they would go to church, now the preachers, the reverends, and so that they basically saw like, hey, this anti-alcohol thing is coming back again. So they put into their sermons and talked about how alcohol is bad and horrible, you know, and that the saloons were, corrupt and ungodly, and they led you to temptation, and you know, um, that it's again the devil's drink, and you know, so yeah. So you have the wives at home, the churches basically telling people you're going to go to hell if you drink. And then you got the factory owners who basically said, yeah, you know what? That's why we have a lot of accidents at our facility. That's why production isn't as much, because these workers show up drunk. That's why this guy, what accidentally put his hand in a gears and it got cut off. That's why this big old container of like steel fell on a dude and squashed him to death, is because he wasn't paying attention. He was drunk. He was unable. Thing is, guys, accidents did happen at the workplace back then, but a lot of times it was because these guys were tired, they were exhausted, they worked long hours and were pushed to keep production going. Um, but these factory owners basically saw it as a way of trying to tell Congress and people like, hey, if alcohol is illegal, then these guys will be sober, they'll be able to focus, and production will increase. Okay. Now, when World War One started, when the US got involved, President Woodrow Wilson, that dude you see right there in the glasses, he instituted a wartime prohibition. Because I don't know if you know how beer is made, but it's made with wheat, barley, rye, hops, things like that. And those type of material, they can be used to make food. And that's what he was saying. We're gonna save this grains, the wheat and stuff like that, to make food for our soldiers overseas, for those soldiers who are fighting. Okay. Now, while this is going on, Congress is meeting with people and stuff like that, and they started working on the paperwork to make the 18th Amendment, and it passes Congress, it gets ratified, and it makes basically the manufacturing, which means to make it, the transportation and sale of intoxicating liquors. And that means everything from beer, wine, tequila, vodka, whiskey, all that, everything illegal. Okay, so you cannot make it, you cannot move it from place to place, and you cannot sell it. Okay, this became known as the Volstead Act, or as the history books would come to call it, Prohibition. And it would start on January 17th, 1920, and it would continue for another like 13, 14 years. All right. So, like I said at the beginning of this video, um, the question, there is no question because now it's an exit ticket. And again, in your worksheet, there is no exit ticket on there. It's on another sheet of paper. You only get that when you're in class. Okay, when I'm giving this lecture video or the lecture and stuff like that. So in order to make up for that, you are going to have to make up some points by doing uh, a achieve 3000, a word search and stuff like that. Okay, but again, like I said, you can only do one word search, and they're only worth like 5 points for this. The question, and that's it. You can't be doing 8 word searches and stuff like that. Okay. So, with that being said, hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. So, with that being said, you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later, okay?